Stunning news. The President of the United States now confirming to the world that he and the First Lady of the United States have both tested positive for the coronavirus, and they will quarantine. The president tweeting out just moments ago here in the United States, 12:54 a.m., said, "Tonight, Flotus and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together." Again, the President of the United States confirming via Twitter that he is now tested positive for COVID-19, and the First Lady as well. We have been on the air this evening here on CNN since about 9:45, reporting about the president. The president confirming the news that was first reported by Bloomberg Network, that the president of the United States had come in contact with Hope Hicks. Hope Hicks, who is his one of his top aides, closest aides, testing positive for coronavirus. After she tested positive, the president and the First Lady got their tests, and they were awaiting it. The president gave an interview to Fox News tonight explaining that to Fox News viewers that he was awaiting test results, he and the First Lady, and that they would quarantine. I want to bring in now Samantha Vinograd, who is our national security correspondent, and also Brian Selter joins us as well. So, Sam, listen, the news we're getting now from the president, you have said that this was how did you put it, a red alert for the administration when it comes to what could happen. And now I think our worst fears, and I'm sure the presidents and the First Ladies, have been realized.
Don, I said hours ago that this was a code red moment for the U.S. government before we even had these diagnoses from Flotus and POTUS. At this point, knowing that the president is sick and that the pandemic is affecting personnel in the White House, this may be the most dangerous moment that the U.S. government has ever faced. The president is suffering from a deadly virus. This feels like something we should be watching on an episode of Homeland. The president of the United States is suffering from a deadly virus. He has to quarantine. He is not able to fully perform his duties as commander-in-chief. Based upon the number of personnel that he comes into contact with every single day without wearing a mask, it is logical that other senior personnel within the national security apparatus could be infected by this virus. At minimum, they will also be unable to fully perform their duties. The U.S. government is incredibly vulnerable at this moment. We do not have a full team on deck, and that means that there are major gaps in our national security coverage based upon this diagnosis.
So what are the risks here? What happens? Because as what has been reported tonight is that, I'm trying to get the information here, because in full transparency, we had just gotten off the air when this news came across Twitter, by the way, that the president and the First Lady had tested positive for coronavirus. This is what I'm learning, Sam, that the vice president was not in close contact with Hicks. But he was in the Oval Office on Tuesday, meaning that he was now in close contact with the President of the United States, who is now positive for coronavirus. The President is going to have to quarantine. I would assume that some of the work would have to be handed to the Vice President of the United States. But if the Vice President of the United States has to quarantine as well, then that would probably go to the Speaker of the House. Who knows what happens at this moment? Can you walk us through this? Is there a precedent for this?
Well, sure. The immediate task is twofold. Number one, Don, the president of the United States may be super spreader number one at this juncture, based upon the number of people that he comes into contact with. Before we even get to continuity or simultaneous to that, personnel have to track who he came into contact with to try to stop the outbreak within the top tiers of the U.S. government. Simultaneous to that, there is, as you mentioned, a continuity plan that is in place. Every administration puts together one of those continuity plans, does scenario planning such that if infection does cripple the top tiers of the U.S. government, there is a continuity plan in place. But Don, I don't have great faith that this administration has done any scenario planning. At this point, it is unclear to me that the president and his team have done just the basic homework to try to figure out what to do if the president of the United States is unable to fully perform his duties. This is an unprecedented situation based upon the infection and based upon the White House's lack of preparedness in this situation.
I need both of you to stand by, Sam and Brian. I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, the breaking news tonight is that the President of the United States and the First Lady have both tested positive for the coronavirus. The President releasing the information via Twitter just moments ago, saying tonight, the FLOTUS and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. Caitlin, are you getting anything from the White House, from the administration? What are you hearing?
Yeah, we are, Don. This is a nightmare scenario for the West Wing. 32 days before Donald Trump is up for re-election, he and the First Lady have now tested positive for coronavirus. And we just got a memo from the president's physician that the White House just released. I haven't even read it yet, so I'm just going to read it to you as I am going through it for the first time. It's from the White House doctor, Dr. Sean Conley. You remember him. We've heard from him before as he's gone over the president's health. And he says, I release the following information with the permission of President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. He says, this evening I received confirmation that both President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have tested positive for coronavirus. He says they are both well at this time and they plan to remain at home within the White House during their convalescence. He does not specify a time there, Don. He says the White House medical team and I will maintain a vigilant watch, and I appreciate the support provided by some of the country's greatest medical professionals. He says, rest assured, I expect the president to continue carrying out his duties without disruption while recovering, and I will keep you updated on future developments. Don, it's that last line that's going to raise some questions on what exactly this means for the president, if he's going to be in quarantine in the residence for the next 2 weeks, which is what the par for the course is. How does that affect how he's doing his job? Because Dr. Sean Conley says he's going to continue performing the duties of the office. I assume that means there's not going to be any kind of transfer of power situation going on, but the day-to-day in the West Wing is not going to be realistic given that the president is positive for this highly contagious disease. So there are going to be so many questions raised, and also questions raised, Don, about what the president did today and yesterday and about those people he was around, because he attended an indoor fundraiser today and hours later has tested positive for coronavirus. He was not wearing a mask at that fundraiser, and now he has coronavirus. He was around thousands of people at this rally outdoors last night, but still in pretty close proximity to these people in this crowded area. This is going to raise so many questions, Don, but I cannot stress enough, this is a nightmare scenario for the White House, and we had a suspicion this was in the making because they had been so quiet about what his diagnosis was, and it had taken so long for us to get these results that something seemed to be up, because they have that 15-minute test, and of course now we know exactly what it was that was going on.
Caitlin, listen, I think it's important. I want to read the tweet, and I want you to read this. You said it's Sean Conley, Dr. Sean Conley. I want you to read the entire statement because I think it's important for our viewers here in the United States and around the world who are watching. First of all, this is how we learned, Caitlin, of the President and the First Lady's positive testing for the coronavirus. It says, tonight, FLOTUS and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. That was the first official word that we got, that the President and the First Lady had tested positive. And then, Caitlin, you got a response sent out to you and the media from the President's doctor. What does that statement say?
Yeah, so that's this memorandum from Dr. Conley. And so he says that they're going to be quarantining during their convalescence. It does not say how long the two of them are going to be quarantining, but obviously we're going to assume that means the president's trip to Orlando tomorrow is off. But then it does say at the end, rest assured, I expect the president to continue carrying out his duties without disruption while recovering. Don, it is going to be really interesting to see what the president does, because 32 days from today is November 3rd. That is the election. The president had 2 weeks of campaigning on his schedule. Obviously, it is critical because he is down in the polls. So the question of whether or not he's going to want to be sitting at the White House is something that they are going to have to deal with, because this is something that is very unlike how the president has reacted to things in the past. Of course, now that he's tested positive, it completely changes the calculation of everything. And it raises questions about how smart it was for the White House to put all of these measures that medical experts have said to take, so you do not have coronavirus spread happening to the wind, not wearing a mask, not social distancing, not taking any of these measures. And we have seen that it has ended up in the worst case scenario for the White House, with an aide testing positive and the president and the first lady now also testing positive.
But there were, as you said, as you mentioned, there were other people who were in close contact with the president of the United States and also with Hope Hicks as well.